welcome back to this quick look at yoga in the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, when we last left off, we discovered that the Gita was composed as part of the Sanskrit epic Mahabharata, sometime between 200 BCE and 200 CE, and it proposed two new big ideas, which were called Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, discipline through action, Karma Yoga, and discipline through devotion, Bhakti Yoga. And the Gita said these are two solutions to the central problems of Hinduism. The problem of dharma, knowing what's the right thing to do, and the problem of karma, the fact that harmful, violent actions that we have to do will lead to future negative consequences for our souls, leaving us trapped in the world of suffering, pain, trauma, death, rebirth. In this segment, let's walk through a few verses of the Gita where we can get a very basic understanding maybe of these ideas of Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga and how they're supposed to help you avoid karmic bondage, how you can gain freedom and inner peace without having to renounce worldly life. Now, if you remember our friend Arjuna, he was worried a bit, very much, about fighting in this war and having to kill lots and lots of people that he loved and cherished. And he was worried that he was going to accrue lots and lots of bad karma, which will keep him trapped in the world of suffering for many lifetimes to come. So he wanted to quit. He wanted to pursue a life of renunciation, contemplation, becoming a hermit, basically. Krishna says no, and he first gives him an alternative path. You can continue to act in the world without being impacted by all this karmic bondage you're worried about. You can have your cake and eat it too, basically. And the way to do this is by letting go, but not by letting go of worldly action altogether, but instead of letting go of your attachment to the results of the actions that you do. That, he says, is what's causing you stress, not the actions themselves per se. Even not doing action, he says, is still an action. So if you're a soldier, you have to fight. You have to kill the enemies. That's your job. If you quit, that's still an action, actually, that's probably going to hurt your squad, right? It'll probably lead to a failure of your side to win the war. Plenty of negative karmic consequences for you down the road. But if you fight without any self-interest in killing the people that you're supposed to kill, without self-interest in that paycheck that you're getting for it, other rewards you might get like medals or badges or whatever, basically if you develop a detachment from the fruits of the actions that you have to do, the idea is that then karmic bondage doesn't take place. The negative karma doesn't stick to your spirit, your soul. Here's how Krishna puts it. It's a very important verse. A lot of people memorize it. Gita 2:47. Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhur ma te sangostu akarmani. Your obligation is to the action and never to its fruits. Do not be motivated by the fruit of your actions. Do not become attached to non-action either. The state of a detachment or disinterest, the Gita calls Karma Yoga, the disciplined path of action, which leads to a state of equanimity, treating everyone and everything in the world impartially without self-interest. Abandon your attachment and engage in worldly action, Arjuna, while standing firm in yoga. Consider success and failure to be equal. This equanimity is called discipline yoga. Yogastha Kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhayo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. The Gita spends several chapters actually explaining how you're supposed to do karma yoga. It gets complicated, but the basic idea is to think of your life as being kind of a sacrificial ritual. Maybe it's actually hard for us to understand since we're not so bound up by religious rituals, maybe in modern day Canada. But what about if you imagine if you were an actor acting in a movie? In that case, the things you say, the things you do, it's all controlled by a script, right? Maybe you're playing, the love interest of Brad Pitt and you have to kiss him. Maybe you're the villain in The Mandalorian and you have to kill innocent people, kidnap Baby Yoda, say very mean things. You do all of these things in the movie, but you aren't really doing them. right? You have to cultivate an inner detachment from those actions. You're kissing Brad Pitt, but it's not you that's really kissing Brad Pitt, right? It's just the characters that are doing the kissing. It's not really you that's kidnapping baby Yoda. It's just the character you're playing who's doing that. The idea of karma yoga is to use yoga to cultivate that detachment from your actual real world actions as if you were an actor in a movie. That way you become freed from the guilt, the karmic bondage, the consequences of whatever actions you have to do, whether good or bad, because the script says you have to do them. So what benefit does this karma yoga have on a person? Why should we do it? Why not just be kind to others and kind of move on? In chapter 5 of the Gita, Krishna gives some indications of what a karma yogi is like. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyah sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvannapi na lipyate. The person who's purified himself, conquered his senses, is accomplished in yoga. Although he's active, he's not defiled because his self is identical with the self of all beings. This kind of feeling that comes from doing karma yoga, being at one with everyone, being in harmony with all beings, this leads to a kind of peace, right? An extraordinary feeling of equanimity, impartiality. Krishna explains this in 5:18. I find it to be quite thought-provoking, actually. Especially if you care about equality, social justice, peace, harmony, that kind of thing, might be a key to figure out how to actually develop that feeling in our lives. Here's how it goes. Vidyavihina sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva shvapake cha pandita samadarshinaha. The learned ones see a knowledgeable, well-mannered Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and the eater of dogs as being one and the same. Now, if this idea of treating everyone and everything one and the same is what karma yoga is all about, how exactly are we supposed to do this karma yoga? How do you both keep your day job, do your karma, but also work on that inner yoga, the discipline of your mind, your intellect, your ego, so that you can reach a level where you treat everyone with equanimity? Turns out that it's kind of a challenging thing. Krishna talks about it in detail in chapter 6 of the Gita. It's a fascinating step-by-step description of what yoga practice would have looked like 2,000 years ago. But I want to actually skip it for now in the video. We'll read through each of these verses, these amazing passages, in our live session. It'll be fun. For now, though, let's jump to the takeaway that comes at Gita 6:28. He says, a yogin who constantly yokes himself in this way is freed from defilement. He enjoys the touch of Brahman, which is infinite happiness. Yunjanneva sadatmanam yogi vigada kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. I think maybe Malinar's translation is a bit wonky. If it were me, I would translate it as following. Always keeping himself under control. Yunjannapi eva sadatmanam. The yogi becomes free of defilements. Yogi vigata kalmashaha. He easily experiences that tremendous joy that comes from contact with the infinite spirit. Brahma samsparsham. So that's it. That's karma yoga. Krishna gives Arjuna a method to detach his true self through yoga from the role that he has to play, his script in society in this war. Karma yoga. There's one problem, though. Arjuna says it's too hard. He says this kind of inner meditation, concentration, detangling the true self from the material self, all that stuff sounds great, but it's way too hard for me. I'm just an archer. I shoot arrows. I fight battles. That's kind of it. I can't do all of this philosophizing. Isn't there something easier for people like me? Well, it turns out there is something easier, and this is where Krishna proposes a second, much easier, much simpler, straightforward option for Arjuna and others to follow. This is the path of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of religious devotion. It's meant not just for Arjuna, but for the billions now of mainstream Hindus who followed the Gita over the past 2,000 years. This is why the Gita is a big deal. It outlines how ordinary people are supposed to worship and think about God if you're Hindu. It turns out that Krishna isn't just a chariot driver. It's not just an ordinary human prince. He's actually a human incarnation, an avatara of the Hindu supreme god, Lord Vishnu, who's come down to rid the earth of evil. And this is why Arjuna has to fight the war and win it. Right? Krishna says that karma yoga is too hard. That's okay. Don't worry. You can just devote yourself to me, to God. I'll take care of your karmic bondage and suffering. Trust me, trust God. Worship him with devotion. Dedicate the results of your actions to God, and it'll all turn out well. Krishna spends 6 chapters, actually 7 through 12, outlining how to do this yoga of devotion. And in the end, he gives Arjuna, he gives him a first-hand vision of his divine form. It's one of the more psychedelic parts of the Gita, actually. There's a lot we can talk about in terms of Hindu religious culture in this section of the Gita, but in terms of yoga, maybe the important thing to take away is that Krishna, Vishnu, functions here exactly in that role that Ishvara played in Patanjali's yoga system. He's the object of dedication, of devotion, your yogic meditation. In 9:27-28, he outlines how to do this devotion, this bhakti to God. Here's Davis's translation of this. If one presents to me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water with devotion, I accept that offering of devotion from the donor. Therefore, Arjuna, whenever you act, make an offering, sacrifice, donate something, or undertake an ascetic practice, do all of this as an offering to me, and you'll be freed from the bondage of your actions, whether good or bad results. In other words, devotion works the same way as doing inner yoga. If you dedicate your life and your work to Ishvara, to God, it has the same effect as controlling your senses, your mind, your desires, and all of that stuff. Basically, instead of working on your inner self to detach it from the fruits of actions, you simply redirect those fruits towards God, towards doing devotional service to God. Not only is bhakti then easier than karma yoga, it's also open to all kinds of people, high, low, male, female, whoever. He explains this in 9:32. Those who take refuge in me, even women, Vaishyas, Shudras, or those born impure, they nevertheless reach the highest destination. Finally, he explains it's the easiest path of them all. All you have to do is devote yourself to God and you'll be all right. Finding yourself in this impermanent and unhappy world, join yourself to me. Fix your mind on me. Devote yourself to me. Sacrifice to me. Honor me. And with yourself yoked to me as its highest end, you'll come to me. This religious path is ultimately what Krishna preaches to Arjuna. It's his takeaway answer. Arjuna is fully convinced of this path when he sees Krishna's cosmic form, his divine form, as the supreme Lord Vishnu. So as we bring our session to a close, maybe we can take away a few ideas about karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and also that third path that we didn't talk about, the path of knowledge, jnana yoga, that Krishna does outline in the Gita. All three work, he says, but each one is a bit more open and easier than the previous one, right? Jnana yoga, the discipline of knowledge, requires total renunciation, and you need a certain capacity for philosophical inquiry. It's not for everybody. Karma yoga, where you relinquish your interest in the fruit of action, but remain active in worldly life, is easier and it is for everybody, but it still involves inner self-discipline through yogic meditative practices where you have to learn how to control your senses, your mind, your ego. Maybe it's not for everybody. Bhakti yoga is the easiest, though, where you maintain an everyday consciousness and dedication to God. You pray, you visit the temple, you perform offerings, you dedicate your life in service to Vishnu. Actually, he says it's okay if it's not Vishnu, if it's any other god like Shiva or the goddess, anyone. They are all ultimately manifestations of the same Lord, the same Ishvara, the same Vishnu. Okay, so hope you enjoyed this exploration of how yoga is articulated in the Gita, how maybe the Gita's ideas would have shaped or contoured people's interpretations of that when that Ishvara pops into classical yoga philosophy. Next week, we'll be moving out of the classical period. We'll move into the second millennium to turn to the more physical, postural side of pre-modern yoga in India as we enter the complicated but very fascinating world of Hatha Yoga. So till then, thanks for watching. See you next time. Dhanyawadaha.